Have you ever sent a text and then watched silence say more than words ever could? No reply. No reaction. Just that cold space between you caring and them not even noticing. You check your phone. Again, you overthink, and suddenly you're not texting anymore. You're chasing validation. But here's what no one tells you. It's not about the message you sent. It's about the energy behind it. Most men text from anxiety, not awareness. From craving, not confidence. And that's exactly why they get ignored. This video will change that. You're about to learn 3 Stoic principles that make your words magnetic without pretending, performing, or playing games. When you use them, you don't just get replies. You create presence. You build real connection, and you never beg for attention again. So if you're tired of guessing what to say, smash that like button. And if you're ready to text like a man who owns his worth, not one who pleads for it, subscribe now. Let's begin. Number 1, texts that trigger curiosity. There's a reason some men get left on read, while others seem to live rent-free in her mind after sending just one message. It's not because they're more attractive, or more successful, or more charming. It's because they understand one powerful truth. Attention is earned through emotional gravity, not logic. And nothing pulls stronger than curiosity. Curiosity is the invisible thread that tugs at the human mind. When something feels incomplete, the brain locks on. It seeks resolution. That's why we binge-watch shows with cliffhangers. That's why we reread texts that hint at something deeper. It's not the content, it's the gap. The space between what's said and what's left unsaid. And that space, when used well, becomes power. Most men don't get this. They send texts like, "How's your day?" or "What are you up to?" They're polite. Harmless, but also predictable and easily ignored. These messages close the loop before it even begins. There's nothing in them to spark thought, stir emotion, or create mystery. They're complete, which makes them forgettable. Now imagine receiving this instead. "I just realized something strange about you." Or, "You showed up in my dream last night, doing something I didn't expect." All of a sudden, you're not just reading a message, you're involved in a story. You feel something. Your brain opens a loop and it needs closure. This emotional hook doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. And this, ironically, is how you stop chasing and start attracting. The Stoics, though living in a pre-digital world, understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not necessary, do not say it." This wasn't a plea for silence. It was a call for precision. Say only what has weight. Let your words create space. In a world drowning in noise, clarity becomes magnetic. When you speak or write with restraint, people listen more closely. Not because you're withholding out of ego, but because you're speaking with presence. Seneca echoed this when he wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the soul." If your messages are anxious, overly detailed, or trying too hard, they reflect inner unrest. But if your words are calm, intentional, and suggestive, they reflect depth. A Stoic man doesn't text to prove something, he texts to connect. And that's why his words hold weight. Let's take this deeper with a real-life historical example. Julius Caesar, though not a Stoic himself, often employed the same principle in diplomacy. His written letters, short, suggestive, and restrained, drew out curiosity and loyalty. He knew that when you say less, others project more. When you don't reveal your entire hand, people lean in. They engage. And in that engagement, power is transferred to you, not through force, but through presence. Another example is Cato the Younger, one of the fiercest practitioners of Stoic discipline. He was famous for his brevity and intentional silence. When others argued or postured in the Roman Senate, Cato often said nothing. But when he did speak, every word struck like iron. He understood that mystery creates weight. That presence is not about volume. It's about what your absence makes others feel. His restraint earned him respect. His clarity made him unforgettable. That's the power of saying less with more discipline. And then there's Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, who taught that philosophy isn't about speaking more, but listening better. He believed that curiosity begins not with clever phrasing, but with the humility to observe. Zeno taught his students that a wise man asks questions not to manipulate, but to reveal. When applied to conversation, especially in a world of fast texts and shallow chatter, this philosophy becomes a rare and powerful force. Most men speak to be liked. Stoic men speak to understand, and in doing so become magnetic without effort. Now let's bring this back to messaging. When you write, your goal is not to inform, it's to evoke. You want her to feel something, to pause, to wonder, and most importantly, to imagine. So instead of saying, "had a weird day," you say, "something today reminded me of you, and I still don't know why." Sarkinum. She'll want to know what she'll ask. And when she does, don't give it away too easily. Respond with something like, "I'll tell you, but only if you've ever felt like someone was on your mind right before something strange happened." Friedimat, you're no longer just chatting. You're co-creating an emotional experience. This is not manipulation. This is mindful influence. And it starts with the willingness to say less so that more can emerge. The storytelling world has a term for this: the open loop. It's when you begin a thought, but don't finish it. When you ask a question, but delay the answer. When you hint at something, but let the other person follow the thread. Why does it work? Because humans crave completion. The unknown unsettles us, in a good way, and that unsettled state is what keeps someone engaged, checking their phone, leaning forward into you rather than away. This is why the Stoics place such emphasis on self-command. When you're calm within yourself, you don't need to over-explain. You don't need to text paragraphs to be understood. You don't need to prove you're interesting. You are interesting because your words reflect a life of internal order, not emotional chaos. Think of Epictetus, who once said, "It is not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Do most men judge silence as rejection? They panic. They overtext to remain duanshun. They try to fix, but the Stoic man, he lets the silence breathe. Because he knows if curiosity was triggered, she's thinking, and thinking is far more powerful than responding out of habit. Let's go one step deeper. Curiosity is more than a tactic. It's emotional leverage. It's the subtle art of letting someone lean into you, rather than you constantly leaning toward them. When a man texts without mystery, he's performing. He's chasing, and he's giving all his power away in an effort to be liked. But when he texts from self-awareness, when he leaves space for the imagination, he invites a different kind of engagement. He becomes the question in her mind, not just the answer in her inbox. So here's a practical shift. Your message should open a loop and ask more than it answers. For example, instead of, "What's up?" you might say, "Guess what random thing made me think of you today?" Instead of, "Hope you're having a good day," say, "Today felt weirdly like something you would have predicted. No idea why." And instead of, "I had a dream about you," try, "You did something unexpected in my dream last night. Want to guess what it was?" These aren't games. They're reflections of inner awareness. You're inviting, not demanding, and you're letting her mind meet yours halfway. Another insight: timing matters. If you respond too fast with too much, you remove the tension. But when you hold back just slightly, not out of strategy, but self-control, you allow the other person to enter your pace. That's leadership. That's presence. The year one, Siri. And that brings us to the Stoic truth most men overlook. Curiosity is a sign of life. If your words spark it, they're alive. If they don't, they're forgotten. So pause before your next message and ask, does this create a question in her mind? Does it make her feel something she doesn't feel from others? Does it leave space, or does it fill space? Because when you get this right, you'll notice the shift. She asks more questions. She engages deeper. She stops ghosting and starts reaching. Why? Not because you said more, but because you said less with presence. Marcus Aurelius also said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And your texts, they become dyed with the clarity or chaos of your mind. If your thoughts are calm, your messages carry power. If your thoughts are desperate, your messages carry noise. So dye your words in clarity. Speak less. Mean more. Text not to impress, but to connect. Let your words open a loop. Let your silence hold tension. Let your presence speak louder than emojis ever could. And most importantly, be the man who doesn't fill the space, but creates it. Number 2, texts that build anticipation. Curiosity gets her attention, but anticipation is what makes her stay. And if curiosity is the spark, anticipation is the slow-burning fire that keeps her mind circling you long after the conversation ends. Most men never learn how to build it. They either overshare, overcommit, or overexplain. In doing so, they kill the one thing that creates emotional momentum, the feeling of not knowing what's coming next. You see, when anticipation is activated, something powerful happens in the brain. Dopamine gets released, not from the event itself, but from expecting it. That's the same chemical that lights up when people plan a vacation, unwrap a gift, or wait for a surprise. Anticipation doesn't just stimulate desire, it fuels imagination. And imagination is what makes your presence linger, even when you're not around. So how do most men destroy anticipation? Simple. They reveal too much, too soon. They rush to please. They send messages like, "I planned something for Friday. We're going to that rooftop bar you love." And sounds sweet, but it ends there. There's no build-up, no suspense, no space for her imagination to fill. She smiles politely and moves on. But now picture this. You say, "I've got something planned for Friday. I'm curious how long it'll take you to figure out what it is." Or even better, "I saw something today that made me think of you. Can't wait to show you, but I'm not saying when." Dreaded and her mind is moving. She's picturing possibilities. She's guessing. She's engaged. The Stoics knew something vital about desire and timing, especially when it came to self-restraint. Epictetus taught that true strength lies in the ability to delay gratification. He said, "No great thing is created suddenly." And that applies to texting just as much as it does to mastering your emotions. When you hold back just enough, not to withhold but to shape the experience, you create value. You turn a message into a moment. Marcus Aurelius added to this by reminding us that the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. It requires constant adjustment. The same is true when building anticipation. You're not leading with brute force. You're listening, feeling, adjusting your pace. Not too fast, not too slow. You leave room for her to step in, to wonder, to want more. That space is where connection grows. Here's the paradox. Most men think that saying more makes them more interesting, but the opposite is true. When you say just enough to light the spark and hold back enough to keep the mystery alive, you create emotional tension. And emotional tension is unforgettable. Let's get practical. Instead of saying, "I have something exciting to tell you," try, "If I told you what I just realized about you, you wouldn't believe me." And when she asks what it is, don't answer right away. Respond with, "You sure you want to know?" Might change the way you see me. Now she's leaning in. Now there's energy. It's no longer just texting. It's an emotional experience. But this isn't about playing games. It's about creating movement. Most conversations die because they have no direction. They go in circles, exchanging pleasantries until both people lose interest. Anticipation changes that. It adds forward motion. It builds towards something. Even if the reveal is small, the act of waiting transforms it into something meaningful. Cicero, while not a Stoic, once said that mystery and suggestion were the soul of rhetoric. That the best communication wasn't explicit, it was evocative. That's what you're aiming for here. You're not writing a grocery list. You're creating emotional contrast. You're giving her something to feel, not just something to read. Let's look at another historical example. Seneca. He often wrote letters that ended without complete conclusions. Why? Because he wanted the reader to return to their own mind to finish the thought. He understood the value of participation. When people fill in the gaps, they internalize the message. And that's exactly what anticipation does. It invites her to participate in the emotional rhythm of your connection. So how do you apply this in your text? Start by introducing mystery early. Don't open a conversation with every detail. Begin with a teaser. Something like, "Today was wild. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it." When she asks what happened, don't give her the story. Say, "I'll tell you, but only after you guess what part of my day reminded me of you." It's not about being evasive. It's about being engaging. And when you do reveal something, reveal it in pieces. For example, is there something I want to tell you, but I'm still figuring out how to say it? I noticed something about you, and it's messing with my head a bit. In a good way. These statements create open loops. They plant emotional seeds. And most importantly, they let her imagination get involved. The Stoics were masters of emotional restraint, not because they were cold, but because they understood that control is strength. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lived with radical simplicity. He believed that nothing valuable should be rushed, especially truth. When applied to connection, this teaches us that emotional honesty doesn't mean emotional flooding. You can be sincere without being overexposed. In fact, the more precisely you share, the more deeply it lands. Another benefit of anticipation, it rewires your presence in her mind. When she begins to associate your name with the feeling of something good is coming, you've already won. You've stopped being one of many and become a source of emotional momentum. She checks her phone not out of habit, but hope. And that is rare. But let's be clear. Anticipation only works when it's backed by substance. If you tease but never deliver, the effect wears off. So when you finally do share, make it count. Even a small reveal becomes powerful if it resolves the tension you built. It could be as simple as saying, "Remember when I said I saw something that reminded me of you? It was this song. And now I can't hear it without thinking of you." That moment feels earned. And earned emotion lasts. Most men text like they're trying to check a box. I reached out, I complimented her, I said something nice. But high-level communication isn't about checking boxes. It's about creating impact. It's about learning how to guide the emotional flow. That's what Stoicism teaches us. To lead with presence, not pressure. To shape the moment, not react to it. Before your next message, ask yourself, does this text create anticipation? Does it build towards something? Or does it close the loop before it starts? Does it leave her with a reason to think about you after the screen goes dark? Because the truth is, the man who understands anticipation no longer competes for attention. He becomes the anticipation. He no longer asks for time. He becomes what time bends toward him. Not because he begs for it, but because his energy creates the feeling that something more is coming. And in a world full of men who text to be liked, the man who texts to build momentum stands out like a flame in a room full of flickering lights. So pause, answer, hold space, say less, but say it with tension, with promise, with presence. And she'll keep checking because the story isn't done yet. Number 3, compliments that actually work. Most men think that giving a woman a compliment will instantly make her like them. But if that were true, the nicest guys would never get ghosted. And we both know that's not how it works. Compliments, when used the wrong way, don't build attraction, they destroy it. Not because kindness is wrong, but because flattery without depth feels hollow. And when your words sound like every other man's, they lose their meaning. Here's the harsh truth. Most compliments fail because they're too common, too shallow, or too desperate. Telling her, "You're so beautiful," might be true. But if she's heard it 10 times a day, it means nothing. In fact, it might even work against you. Why? Because it signals that you're noticing the obvious, not the rare. You're reacting to her appearance, not connecting to her essence. And women, especially the ones worth your energy, are starving for depth. Let's take this deeper through the lens of Stoicism. Seneca once wrote, "We should praise not what is common, but what is rare." Oh, this insight is a game changer. The rarest thing about a woman is not her looks. It's her energy, her mindset, her presence. Anyone can see that she's attractive. But very few notice the way she pauses before she speaks. The way she makes others feel safe without even trying. The way she navigates discomfort with quiet strength. These aren't things you can observe from a photo. You have to be present. You have to be paying attention. And that's exactly what most men don't do. The Stoics believed in deliberate observation. Marcus Aurelius didn't just rule Rome, he studied life. People,
behavior,
patterns. His journal is filled with reflections on character, not appearance. He looked beneath the surface, and that's why his wisdom still endures. When you offer a compliment that reveals insight, not just eyesight, you separate yourself from every man who only sees skin deep. So how do you compliment a woman in a way that builds connection, not just momentary validation? Start by slowing down. Really listen to her. Watch how she moves through the world. Pay attention to the way she solves problems, how she treats people who can't offer her anything, how she responds when things don't go her way. That's where the gold is. Then and only then speak, not to impress but to reflect what you've truly seen. Instead of saying you're gorgeous, say you carry yourself with a calm confidence. It's rare, and honestly, it makes people feel safe. Instead of saying you're smart, say the way you connect ideas is different. It's not just intelligence, it's clarity. And clarity is magnetic. These compliments are specific, grounded. Why real ones? They're not about trying to win her approval. They're about expressing your awareness. And that, right there, is what builds emotional gravity. But let's go even deeper. Compliments, when done right, reveal more about you than about her. They reflect what you notice, what you value, and what you're tuned into. If you only compliment what fades, looks, clothes, makeup, you signal that you're driven by impulse. But if you compliment what endures, discipline, resilience, curiosity, you reveal character. You show that you're not chasing validation, you're honoring presence. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that happiness is found in virtue, in excellence of character. He didn't measure people by their charm or status. He measured them by how well they lived in accordance with nature and reason. In relationships, this means learning to value what actually matters: integrity, stillness, growth. When you learn to see those qualities in someone and speak to them, you don't just attract, you awaken something. Let's add another layer from the teachings of Musonius Rufus, one of the least flashy but most practical Stoics. He believed that the true measure of a person was their behavior when no one was watching. He advised men to build relationships based on shared values and mutual respect, not lust or performance. In that spirit, compliments become not a tool for seduction, but a lens for recognition. When you say to a woman, "You handle pressure with grace, and I respect that," you are not flattering her. You are noticing something she didn't even know was visible, and that's what makes it land. Still, there's more, because a well-timed compliment doesn't just build attraction, it builds emotional safety. And safety, paradoxically, is what creates openness. When she feels seen for more than her beauty, when she feels valued for her essence, not just her image, her guard comes down. She becomes more relaxed, more playful, more willing to connect. Not because you forced it, but because you created space for it. Cleanthes, who succeeded Zeno, taught that true leadership begins with personal example, that you must first embody the harmony you wish to inspire in others. This applies in communication too. When your words reflect clarity, depth, and attention, they invite the same in return. A powerful compliment doesn't pull for validation. It stands tall. It says, I see your value and I recognize it, not to gain favor, but because it's real. You have to understand this. Compliments are not currency, they are reflection. When done right, they don't say, please like me. Naren, they say, I see you. And to a woman who is constantly reduced to appearance, that kind of attention feels like emotional oxygen. Because being seen clearly is one of the rarest gifts anyone can give. That's why you must compliment not just what she does, but what her actions reveal. For example, if she tells you she gets up at 5 a.m. to train for a marathon, you don't just say, that's impressive. You say, that level of discipline tells me you're someone who does hard things even when it's inconvenient. And that says a lot about how you live. Full. Now your compliment becomes a mirror that reflects her strength, not your hunger. Another powerful shift is complimenting her effect on the world. Not just who she is, but what she creates. I've noticed people open up around you quickly. That's not luck. That's presence. The re-year one, Siri. Or you make chaos feel manageable. That's a rare energy. These kinds of compliments bypass the surface and hit the soul. And when you do that, you go from being seen as charming to being felt as powerful. This doesn't mean you should never compliment her appearance. Physical attraction matters. But when you do comment on it, make it specific. Make it sincere. Don't say you're hot. Say there's something about your smile. It softens the room. It's like it knows something the rest of us don't. Now you're speaking to presence. Now your words carry story, not just sound. Seneca once said, we are more often frightened than heard, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Apply that here. Many men are afraid to compliment deeply. They think it's too much, too intense. But the truth is, shallow praise is what makes her pull away. It's not depth that's risky, it's banality. When your compliments are real, rooted and rare, she doesn't run. She remembers. There's one final piece of this, and it's crucial. A powerful compliment does not seek reaction. It sets a tone. It invites someone into a space where truth is spoken without agenda. When you express real admiration from clarity, not craving, you shift the whole dynamic. She no longer feels like she's being pursued. She feels like she's being appreciated. Not for what she can give, but for who she already is. So to sum this up, don't compliment to impress. Compliment to express. Express what you admire, not what you think she wants to hear. Compliment the woman who is, not the fantasy you're trying to create. And in doing so, you'll speak in a language most men never learn. The language of presence. Every compliment is a mirror. It reflects your focus, your discipline, your clarity. Most men use that mirror to signal need. The Stoic uses it to signal strength. So before you send your next message, ask yourself, does this compliment create connection, or does it seek approval? Is this a reflection of who I am, or just a tactic to be liked? Because in the end, it's not about what she says in response. It's about what your words reveal. About her, yes. But more importantly, about you. Now you know the truth, Rashurami. It was never about the perfect message. It was never about saying the right thing at the right time to impress someone into liking you. It's always been about something deeper. Your presence, your awareness, your ability to stay rooted in clarity while the world chases validation. You see, most men approach texting like it's a gamble. Throw out some words, hope for a win. But the Stoic doesn't gamble. He builds. He doesn't chase connection. He cultivates it with discipline, intention, and strength. And if you've paid attention, that's exactly what you've learned how to do. You now understand how to craft messages that trigger curiosity. Not because you're trying to manipulate someone, but because you understand that mystery creates movement. You know how to create anticipation, not through gimmicks, but by respecting the power of restraint. You know how to give compliments, not to gain approval, but to reflect real value. And that's rare. When to you must. That's powerful. But above all, you've learned this. You don't text to be liked. You text to lead. And that leadership doesn't come from loud words or clever tricks. It comes from silence before speaking, from clarity before action, from knowing who you are before expecting anyone else to respond. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the standard now. Every message you send from this moment forward is a reflection of your inner world. Make it clean, make it sharp, make it true, because once you step into this new way of communicating, grounded in values, not anxiety, you stop fearing silence. You stop overanalyzing, you stop chasing, and you start becoming the kind of man who doesn't wait for respect. He commands it without demanding a word. He doesn't beg for presence. He is the presence. So don't just walk away with knowledge. Walk away with practice. Begin with your next message. Let it reflect strength, awareness, and depth. And watch how everything shifts. Because when you communicate like a Stoic, you don't just get replies. You get remembered.